I think we're live. Hi, everybody. Articles of ADOS live discussion of episode 6. And I am your host, Lisa Todd, along with my co-host,
Daoud Jiazan.
Daoud Jiazan. So we're just going to dive right into it. The title of episode 6 was Fauci, an expert. Are we live? I don't think we're live. What's going on? Let me try one more time. Oh, and let's go ahead. Accessing cameras.
It does say live here.
Oh, okay. No, it's weird on my end. Let me try one more time. Go back. That's me trying to do too much. Let me try it one more time. Connect the dots. Yeah, we're offline. All right, let me try it one more time. Let me try it one more time.
That Captain and Camila you singing there?
Nah. No. Oh, there we go. Sorry for that interruption. So we'll just continue. Let me see. Episode 6. First of all, let's start by, we started off thanking you guys for making it through all the pre-recorded shows that we had done, and all of the 1 through 5 were pre-recorded, and so you were getting some news that you probably already had heard of, and but we had to do that in order to test the show, see what works, see what didn't, change things if we needed to. For the most part, we don't need to change much. That's how good we are.
Well, that's how good you are. You've been phenomenal in putting all this together. You should get an award. One day you will, I promise.
Okay, thank you. But after we thanked you guys for rocking with us through these the first 5 episodes, episode 6 was I had messaged Daoud that when I was editing that this episode was spooky to me. I had my JFK moment. When I watched JFK, that movie spooked me too. So when you're dealing with government officials and the evilness and things that they do, it can be a little bit spooky. And on top of that, Facebook, YouTube, and these social medias are censoring information that tells the truth about these people. And that includes Dr. Fauci. So the title of this episode was Fauci, an expert in conflicts of interest, ? Because as you'll see when we talk about the main event, he has numerous conflicts of interest when it comes to this coronavirus, the response to the coronavirus, and the plans after the coronavirus has hopefully stabilized, and what they call it. What do they call that when they said that?
When they said what?
When they stabilize the coronavirus, and it's effect it's having on our health systems and our families. So yeah, so let's just dive into some of the rapid news that we talked about. We featured articles from LA Progressive, In These Times, Truth and Media, Business Insider. So we gave you a glimpse of those articles. Then in our personality piece, we discussed if progressives were the base of the Democratic Party, or is ADOS the base of the Democratic Party. I and Daoud and myself agree that the donor class is the base. And for ADOS and for the progressives to understand that and kind of leverage the demands that you're making in a different way, which is with the vote, down ballot strategy, if you feel that's effective, or some people feel the no vote is effective. But somehow you have to signal to the Democrat, the DNC, that they're going to have to work for your vote. And by that, they're going to have to give you a plan, give you an agenda, whether it's a progressive agenda or a Black agenda. So you remember that discussion, Daoud? How did you feel about that?
Yes, I do. It was a very good discussion, and your summation of the reality is really on point, and it's a point that for me was made in the presidential election of 2000, how Blacks were treated then, and it was very obvious that people should not have faith anymore in the Democratic Party, progressive or Black, given what had happened earlier. I realized what happened earlier, which I mentioned during our exchange, which was how Clinton and Gore sold out the base that did consist of a relatively good coalition of working class Black and white voters that were heavily into the Democratic Party because of what effort Jesse Jackson made. So I realized, a lot of people at the time saw it as, well, this is just going to guarantee that Democrats across the board have a better chance of fighting Republicans who were mainly reliant on old money and old technologies as the basis of their financial support. And so this was, Clinton was being skillful in going after those funds. But when he set up the Democratic Leadership Council and was utilizing that to screen future representation from the Democratic Party to all those areas across the board, and you could see over time that those people more and more were drifting more and more to the right, which accounts for why we've been consistently left with lesser than two evil voting options during national and midterm elections. It was very obvious to me by 2000 that they had really just out and out betrayed their base, and that was Black and white working class. And that was, even though NAFTA should have been a wake-up call for me, I mean, this is just my personal journey. Although the suspension of the New Deal Democrat legislation and policies that have been enacted, because such legislation prevented future depressions, economic depressions in the society. When those were obviously betrayed, it was apparent to me by 2000 and after that election that the base was inconsequential to the overall goals of the new Democratic Party.
Right. So I also had suggested that didn't really make the final episode, and that was that the progressives need to have their own party. I mean, they have the money to, go and vet candidates, and they have more money than ADOS so why don't you have your third party? Obviously the DNC is not in line with your values as progressives. You have money, get to it, So I suggested that, but I guess if you feel that, you helped build the DNC, that you don't, you shouldn't have to give it up. But it's the amount of corruption in the DNC, the amount of suppression of our votes, other voices that are not mainstream and status quo are not welcome in the DNC. So.
And also, I have to say that we have to be at least willing to also see, because of things I mentioned earlier, the co-optation of new Democrats that we believed would really advocate for either base, progressive or Black agenda. Ilhan Omar, AOC, they have recently been revealing themselves. AOC in particular, who did not support the candidate you were supporting. I mean, really, that's a slap in the face of that candidate you're supporting. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name right now. And so,
Morgan Harper.
Exactly, Morgan Harper. I mean, Morgan Harper, like a champ, is handling it rather, I guess, conscientiously. But really, people should be very angry at AOC's lack of advocacy for Morgan's journey, given that it was very similar to her own. And then for her to do what she's done, hiring new staff that are part of the Democratic leadership, which she went in calling to carpet, and justifiably so. And now it appears that she's been co-opted along with the other Fantastic Four ladies. They need to be challenged. Yeah, the squad, they need to be challenged. So we've got not only the historical betrayals of the Democratic Party against the progressive or Black base, we also have the obvious co-optation of people that got there to where they were because people were so discontented with what was going on. So it's so obvious now that an alternative in the form of a third party or a project takeover of the Democratic Party is well in order.
Right. Yeah. So, if the donor class is the base, really and truly, then the DNC is not going to meet your needs. So I think that's a great option. It takes a lot of people to do a third party. It takes a lot of money to go up against as a third party candidate. And that may be why they have not, to this day, ran a third party candidate, because they thought they had it in Bernie. Bernie, as you say, and much like AOC, falls back in line with the leadership of the Democratic Party. He falls back in line with those same rules that keeps him out, keeps his agenda out. So,
well, as Jimmy Dore and the Black Agenda Report has reported consistently on the inconsistencies of Bernie Sanders, we can start since the 2016 attempt elections. I can say wholeheartedly, I sincerely believe, I can say could be more data so that it could be a solid I know. But right now, I believe that Mr. Bernie Sanders was in league with the Democratic leadership so as to guide potential progressives or Black hopefuls along his agenda so that they could be identified and singled out so they would not be a danger to what would actually unfold. And one of the key elements, and I can name several, but I'll just name one for time, is that he was obviously being cheated in some of these primaries, obviously being cheated, yet he never challenged them personally, nor did he allow his staff to challenge them personally. There should have been challenges not only in the earlier primaries, but the one that Joe Biden ultimately won. There were voting discrepancies there. And one of the biggest discrepancies, I'm sorry, I have to mention the second one. One of the biggest discrepancies was how Black voters who were continually told we really weren't in Bernie's camp. Interesting enough, if you follow the money, which should end a lot of discussions, but that's another reason why this doesn't allow to get into the public arena, is that it turns out that black voters gave him money but voted for Biden. That does not make sense. They gave black voters gave were giving Bernie Sanders a lot more money than Biden. But somehow, when it came to the polls, these same people had to be the same people decided not to show up at the polls. Now we could say that it was local to uh, uh, South Carolina, and that maybe those South Carolinians did not send him money. But this idea that Bernie Sanders had turned off the black electorate was a lie, given the money. And so that's a big discrepancy that Bernie himself could have made, but he didn't, because I sincerely believe that Bernie Sanders allowed himself to be used to segregate those progressives who are willing to be active and give them a bone to go after, but then to capitulate under Bernie again, which is a remake of 2016. So it even makes me think about his genuineness during 2016. So all this was done currently in order to identify those party progressives who would be willing to be active and give them a way to burn off steam and then ultimately come back into the fold. And Bernie was willing to play that role, and he should be held accountable for that, or we're just going to let somebody else do the same thing.
Right. Yeah. So that was our personality piece. We always show our personalities when we do those segments.
And I'm a little angry.
And so one of and I do want to mention one of the rapid news is that you presented, and that was well, it was two of them. One was Sweden. Sweden did a much different type of response to the coronavirus, and essentially they did what is called herd immunity, right? Where they didn't shut anything down. Everybody continued doing what they were doing, and they what did they do? They you said it in here, they had businesses limit density of crowds, schools were not closed. Most of the people that were affected had they had underlying conditions. So, really, they had a total of 1,536 people sought medical care during their COVID-19 crisis. And they're not rising, they're on the down side of coronavirus. And their Minister of Health, much like our Surgeon General, made those decisions early on that they weren't going to close anything down. If you got sick, we're going to take care of the sick. But life goes on. Our bodies will need to learn how to fight off this virus, so they practice herd immunity. So talk to the audience about why Sweden's approach was probably better than our approach, obviously.
I was purposely brief, only giving it my good or excellent article commendation, so that I could save it for this time. So hopefully I'll get a good pat on the head when I see you there, because I was being a good boy but not elaborating. So from number one, Sweden did what we've always done, which is makes this really silly, and people should be asking questions. Again, I'll say it again. Sweden did what we've always done, because that's the science. So you really should be asking your questions. Why do we do this? That's number one. Number 1A, the example of that is we had a big surge in the influenza that impacted us in 2017, where 70,000 people were projected to die. I know we're now above about 65,000 deaths now. So it's not beyond the pale, and people can attribute that to the quarantining. No, they reduced the expected deaths to 60,000, all the way down from 240,000 before there was widespread quarantining among states. So they already downgraded it. All right. So the idea and notion that we needed to do mass levels of quarantining was something new in addressing this. First, we would begin by utilizing herd immunity, and if that proved to be unsuccessful, then you'd go to something more drastic, such as what happened with the Spanish flu then. So the question should be in your mind, audience, why did we do this now and not do this in 2017, where projected deaths were at least 10,000 more higher? Because it wasn't necessary, because the herd immunity approach overall works. And they didn't just do herd immunity as we didn't just do herd immunity. Remember I remember in 2017 that people were wearing masks, people were wiping their hands with all that accelerant that could catch fire, but I won't even go there. They were doing that more often when they were going into shopping areas. They were segregating themselves, which is what they did in Sweden. They segregated themselves when they felt they had symptoms. That's exactly what Americans were doing in 2017. So you really need to ask yourselves the question, why does this happen? Why did this happen? Especially since it went against the science. And the science was saying that it was better to utilize herd immunity because that would automatically inoculate the young, and people that were close to the young with immune systems that weren't damaged could better survive. And the people that would be injured, watch out. The people that would be injured would be those people that have comorbidity issues, and people that have endangered immunities. They would be told to make sure that you're staying away from potential infections, and especially those people who have serious health problems, overweight, obesity, hypertension. I mean, those are things that people could have been emphasized to be warned about. But overwhelmingly, the American public was just told to quarantine. They weren't told, and this is what I pointed out in Miss Angela Nirvana's show, Friends of ADOS TV. Something else we could have learned from what was happening in Wuhan and what was happening in Lombardy, Italy, was that a third factor of people needed to be protected because of what we learned by November and December from what was happening over in those locations. And that was a high density area where industries of pollution are prolific. Because in such areas, the people living in those areas, most, if not all of their lives, are automatically going to have diminished immune systems. So if the authorities were sincerely concerned about all Americans, and especially those Americans who could have susceptibilities to catching it, they would have addressed it from an immune standpoint, so that people, the elderly, people with comorbid systems, if they really felt it was going to be that crazy, they would have done something to protect them. More so, the people that were living in high pollution industry areas. And because of redlining and an overuse of zoning, ADOS are disproportionately in those locations. So not only are we going to quarantine people, which there's a report now recently, people that have been quarantined are still getting COVID, that have been quarantined, that did what they were told. And those people who are going to be in homes, they're going to be also highly polluted because they are in close proximity to polluting industries. So you're going to tell people to stay in their homes more, lock themselves into toxic environments, more toxic environments, so for their protection. But at the same time, they're going to be, especially if they're have comorbid issues, they're going to be more likely to be in a worse state. And as we know, they've been hyping this so much so that people that are not even, who've not even died of COVID, but may have had symptoms of COVID, are being labeled COVID deaths. Now, again, there's a lot of reasons for questions here, but more importantly, back to the earlier statement I was going to make in connection with what they did in Sweden, is that Sweden did the same thing that America has always done. African Americans have always, except for three exceptions, from 1999 to today, three exceptions, Native Americans outpaced us into the numbers of deaths as a result of flu or seasonal flu issues. Three times from 1999 till now, three times. So that means every year, except for those three times, African Americans, ADOS, have been disproportionately dying of every illness. So all of a sudden this year, they're so concerned about American people and disregard how they should have pointed out immune issues or disregarded how people would be susceptible if they lived in or near pollution areas. All of a sudden, they're so concerned that they've now gone all these mass quarantines and disproportionately where ADOS are going to be mass quarantined into households that are going to be highly toxic.
Yeah. The I think once I've heard seen a couple other videos with doctors talking about you know, how we need to be able to have bacteria, exchange bacteria for our immune systems to learn to fight it. After I've done that, I kind of relaxed. I was kind of like a mask police in a sense that I was like, you know, making sure all my family had masks and wearing masks, and then it just flipped the switch. Like, no, my body needs to learn how to handle viruses that are in our environment, so that if it happens, it knows how to fight it. And so I relaxed a little bit on it. I relaxed.
That's why every year, even in recent years, we've always done herd immunity. What you just said right there. So that means what we've been doing is against the science, because the scientist who's a German scientist that I think I posted on the thing, and he has a complicated name, so I don't remember it. He said that what we were doing was in fact going to make the situation worse. And I've just pointed out one way that is already worse for ADOS, being in toxic environments, right? Well, he said it was going to be worse for everybody because it will prolong the problem. How? Because people would not be allowed to acquire herd immunity. That means they won't adapt to this strain, whatever it is, and therefore it'll linger in potential problems for people over time. And when they warn us about the second wave, when they start to unleash or release people from the quarantine, there you go. When the second wave hits, you're going to have people's bodies and immune systems that are not prepared to handle the load of the second wave. And therefore the problem becomes extended, which is, I think, at this point, people have to, besides asking questions, I'm beyond the question stage. Yeah, that's right. It has to be seen as intentional. And so what are the benefits of if it's intentional? Well, there's the security issue. We already identified the population that has a disproportionate number of cases, haven't we? We've already identified that there are technologies out there that can be utilized for control of such populations if they resist the next phase, which is the potential of mandated vaccines.
You're right. Right.
This is why myself and others were willing to be out there protesting.
Yeah.
Overcome the fear.
Right.
Stand up for righteousness and justice.
Right. So, and before we get to the main event, the last rapid news was about it was entitled Fauci's NIAID organization gave $3.7 million to Wuhan lab to study coronavirus in bats. And I don't know if you've seen Twitter today, but there's this thing, it's called Obamagate. They're saying, of course, this was during his administration that Fauci gave this money. So now it's not only that Fauci gave it Wuhan the money to study coronavirus in bats. Now it's Obamagate, and Obama did it, and he's in connection with China and Fauci. So yes, they gave money to China, Wuhan, China, the same lab the very same lab where the virus came out of. They were funding these studies just like they're funding a lot of different studies around the world that are detrimental to you and I. So we're going to move to the main event.
Yeah, let's
that
go.
we preface it. He did it. They did it. Whether who was in administration or not, they're funding these type of things all around the world. So, you know, why they blaming Obama? I ain't protecting him. But it happened during his administration. All right. So our main event is titled Dr. Fauci Throws Cold Water on Conspiracy Theory That Coronavirus Was Created in a Chinese Lab. And this is hilarious because we just did the article where he funded the lab, but he's going to, keep up with this propaganda that, no, there's no possibility that the coronavirus came from a Chinese lab. It hopped from a bat to a human naturally, which scientists all over the world, like, that takes thousands of years of evolution to happen, and that ain't happened. It's unnatural, the way he is presenting it. So this was Daoud's article, so I'm gonna let him take over from here. He interviewed the article. I asked the questions, and let's start with first question. Are you there with me?
Yes, I am. Did you want me to ask the question?
No. I'll ask the questions, and you basically said in the main article, your premise was that in the Wuhan lab where the coronavirus leaked, there was going to be coronavirus there in its natural form because they were studying it. And in its created form, manipulated form, which was released onto, rather accidentally or intentionally leaked out in Wuhan, China. So that's something that you pointed out in this interview when we interviewed this article, and let me say who was the publication was Business Insider. The writer was John Hottingwanger.
Yeah.
Hottingwanger. So we just want to give them credit for the discussion. Let's start there.
Okay. From jump, to be honest, so far it's being investigated whether or not it came from the lab. There's not been any conclusions on that. And again, there's reasons not to trust these people, but so far there's still the conventional wisdom is that it still took place within some market in China. This market was 20 miles away from the lab. But what the problem is that in this article, and the reason why I labeled it propaganda is because there are certain propaganda stances that anybody with average intelligence can spot, and that is the repetition of needless information. He's already been established that he's an expert, and then to say that in the article is a way of shaping the mind that you really don't have to use any reasoning. You're just sold on the fact that he's the expert, and so you don't have to really dice up what he says. Well, these people already lie. They've already proven that they lie, so I have to be skeptical. And so when I notice that they're doing that, I have to go in deeper and take a look at what he says. And that's the reason why I got so focused in my questioning of the article on his use of the term belief. Because if he's using such conclusive evidence in justifying the idea that a man-made virus, that becomes his argument, was not the source of it, but he never addresses the fact that the virus could have also been in its natural state, in the form of the back sequences in the laboratory experiments that it was being used for, then he's given himself an out. But the person who's sold on the idea he's some sort of expert will never ask that question. That's why it's a propaganda article. The other reason why it's a propaganda article is because the journalist who wrote it never had any interest to even inquire as to how unethical it was for the very person who has connections and ties to the very same lab, but all of a sudden will be utilized and be trusted to exonerate that same lab. That Dr. Fauci himself uses and references independent studies to decide that it was not a man-made item, a virus, but he doesn't use independent study to determine whether or not the lab was involved, but the very person that gave them money to study the very thing that's infecting people, he's the one that gets to decide and throw water on it. I mean, come on. And people on Facebook were like passing it to me because they sort of knew my stance on that I was questioning all this, and they sort of gave it to me. Of course, not saying anything along with it, but the whole idea was that, well, here it must be serious. Mr. Fauci is saying there's nothing to any of this stuff, and I didn't say anything to the people, but I just did a review of it on my own page and brought this out. The biggest thing to bring out, aside from that, and for people that think, is that the Business Insider is doing this. Not a medical journal is doing this. Not something in that field. We got the Business Insider. Now, business deals with making money. So who's interested in making money? Well, if aside from this story, if Dr. Fauci is saying and alluding to the idea that there's going to be mandated vaccines for the whole world, there's going to be some money to be made off this. So the Business Insider, it's in their interests, one, to promote business, and number two, to be involved with the connections of making money for their shareholders. And they're also going to be interested in securing Dr. Fauci as an expert who's saying that it didn't begin at this lab, so there's no dirty work going on here. And third, they're going to be in the interest of making sure that Mr. Fauci does appear clean, because he's the guy that's going to be pressing the button on putting people under mandated vaccines. So there's all types of money interest involved in this, and so the Business Insider doing a medical focused inquiry into this and labeling it that he throws hot water or cold water on it, and it's a conspiracy theory, has to be questioned.
Right.
And it's so obvious. I could have done this in high school.
Yeah, I think he did a good job of how you interviewed the article. He had several missing information from it, and not only did he not have answers to some really important questions, like especially the belief question and how that would be used later for out if he had to testify. I think was a good observation. I think your observation on how both the natural coronavirus and the manipulated coronavirus are in the same lab. They just are. It's just common sense. They're studying it. It's there. So I think those were two really good observations, about the main event.
And also, there's some questions about the virus. I could have also gone, but it would have made it more complicated. There's also some scuttlebutt among scientists, one of whom Dr. Fauci is very familiar with. He's a French gentleman. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. He's the one that's credited with finding the HIV virus. He's come forward and has claimed that he believes the virus has been manipulated. So this really gets complicated. And therefore, I believe sincerely there's need for investigation.
Well, that's what they were studying it too. I mean, what are you studying the coronavirus in the Wuhan lab to do? To just study it they were studying it to see whether or not it could, through bat DNA, get transferred to humans. That's what they were studying it for. So he gets up there and plays dumb. He has a lot of conflicts of interest. Yes, he's an expert. He's an expert in conflicts of interest. He's an expert in denying critical drugs, whether it was for HIV, where he ignored it, where there are a number of trials and things that he just slept and not slept, but didn't move forward in the process to get it approved. He did a lot. He did there are some evil geniuses in this world, scientists, and he may be one of them.
And let me go on with one last thing that I could have also entered as a question, but again, I had to stop at some point because there's so much stuff here. The next stuff hits everybody that's on social media, and that is censorship. As you already noted when you began this segment, that censorship is widespread.
Yep.
Well, wouldn't people like to know that a part of Facebook censorship or community standards person dealing with medical issues centered around COVID-19 has been given to a research scientist that worked at the Wuhan lab, received that money from Fauci, and is now overseeing Facebook posts and finding fact check problems with people alluding to the idea that this probably came from the lab, or that they were also utilizing that lab for this specific problem or virus. A lot of people are beginning and noticing how their posts are getting, flagged. Well, this is the person that's flagging it. And again, they're trying to make sure they're going to get paid. And this is one of the ways they're doing it, by trying to control information. There was a drill on this in November of 2019 that explicitly ironed out what we're experiencing now. And one of the things they say in that, and I'll be glad to post it if it won't be overwhelming to people, they say clearly that they're going to have to control social media because people could go out and spout all types of conspiracy theories. Well, they got the woman, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, that worked at the lab that is overseeing judging whether or not people are meeting the Facebook community standards. That in itself is a conflict of interest. She should have, like Dr. Fauci, recused himself from even the question of regards to that Wuhan lab. And this person who's screening and censoring people with their expressed information on social media, particularly Facebook, she should also be recused or recuse herself or be prevented from further advocacy. And it should be seen as advocacy in this regard on Facebook.
I agree. So before we get to our next segment, I would say, these experts that, including Bill Gates, who is not a medical professional, the attorney generals, Trump, whoever gets up to the mic and is telling you something, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist. Just use your logic, your own logic and common sense, your trust, whether or not you feel that you're being lied to. It's natural. So and you can tell what is being presented, if it's propaganda or not. It's hard to tell if you're a newbie, kind of like me. So I listen to more advanced voices like Daoud's, but suspend judgment on a lot of things, that especially if the end result is control of you, your movement, and your own free will. Question whether or not people are telling you the truth. It doesn't, questioning something doesn't take isn't either violent or non-violent. It's just questioning. You can ask questions, and if you can't ask questions, anyway, we got to move on, because we got to the next segment, which is going to be about what's coming up next, and that is in our Voices of ADOS. We played a clip of the interview that will air right after this live at 9 p.m. Learn a thing or two with Mark Stevenson. We interviewed him. It was an hour long, so we couldn't put it in the podcast. We played a little clip, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it. So right after this live, please watch the interview with Mark Stevenson. It'll be on YouTube, as well as it'll be through anywhere you listen to our podcast. The audio will be of the interview will be on our podcast. Another thing we introduced was the donations. We thank everybody that said that they wanted to donate, and there are ways you can do that. Some are free, some are you give monetary support. The first one was where we just make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating. You can leave us a rating especially on iTunes. Leave us a review on iTunes, Google Play Music, anywhere you listen to your podcast. If they have the option of you to leave a review, please do. We would appreciate it. Costs you nothing. The second thing is you could, I think it was, what was the second way? Oh, follow us on our social media pages, share the podcast, share the lives, share information about the show. That's another way you could support the show. I think that's it. I think that's it. And lastly, it was join our Patreon. We have a Patreon page. It is patreon.com/articles of ADOS. For as little as $3 a month, you can help support and keep us continue to bring you this great content. And that's the best way. And we do have Cash App, # Articles of ADOS. Everything that you donate, ways that you donate to, is always our name, Articles of ADOS. All right, so Daoud, is there anything that you want to add before we go?
No, thank you very much. This was a great segment, and I hope that people continue to ask questions.
Yes,
our lives and our liberty will continue to count on that.
Right. So if you didn't watch us live, it's okay. If you catch us later this evening or sometime this week, ask any questions in the chat or below in the little area down there. Oh, I forget what you call that. Comment section. In the comment section. Best question gets a promo pack from us. So ask us any questions. If you've already answered a question and you are getting a promo pack right now, we are not sending you multiple packages of promo pack. We appreciate you if you ask a question and you already received the promo pack. What's up, Cersei? Sorry if I pronounced your name on Periscope. Thank you for joining us. We're about to head on out. So guys, just in 15 minutes, an exclusive interview will air with Mark Stevenson. Learn a thing or two with Mark Stevenson. We were all there. We interviewed him. And I look forward to any questions or any thoughts that you have about the interview, and let us know. All right. So until next time, I'm going to make sure I stop the recording on this one. Until next week, next Sunday, we will be discussing episode 7. Episode 7 drops this Thursday. All right. Articles of ADOS family. See you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
All right, just one.